Pencils of Promise began in hopes of building one school. We believe that where you start in life shouldn't dictate where you finish, and that every child deserves access to a quality education. That belief took us around the world, building schools in Asia, Latin America, and now Africa. Today, we're opening up a new school every 90 hours. Every single one of those means so much to a child, a family, and a community. But it's also changed the life of someone who, just like you, learned about us and decided to make these kids a part of their story too. While I built the first school to honor my 80-year-old grandma, a college DJ sold albums to build our 30th. Joel ran a marathon to build our 50th. Kennedy biked across the entire country to build our 70th. Sophia asked for donations instead of birthday presents to build our 90th. And George, a university student from Ghana's Passion, put us over the 100-school mark. These are the stories of people just like you. Every single one of us has the ability to change a life. You just have to believe in it. You just have to become dedicated to it. How will you build the next Pencils of Promise school?
Use this? Oh, okay. Is this okay? Good morning. Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. Great. Looks like I'm going to have to be a hurdler up here, doesn't it? Let's see here. Great. Okay, great. How did my life take me here? Under a tree, teaching English to children I didn't even know in West Africa. You see, I was a kid, maybe just like you. I just wanted to grow up and be like my dad. My dad was a business guy, a magazine publisher. And he didn't publish just any magazine. He published this magazine. Now, does anybody know what this is? You do? Oh, that's so cool. When I was about 8 years old, my dad used to he started taking me to his office. And he had this huge storeroom full of magazines that he wanted me to organize, right? And these were the magazines. And I had to organize them from chronological order, like the earliest to the latest, and that was my job. And I really enjoyed it. Does anybody know who this guy is? Does anybody know his name? If you know, I have a really cool Pencils of Promise t-shirt to give anybody who knows. Now, this is a tough question. Does anybody know his name? Are you Googling it now? You know, Alfred E. Newman is right. I might have to adjust my sizing here. He looks a little bigger than what I... All right. I have two more, so hang on. In the summer of 1972, Alfred E. Newman was about as cool as it got. He was kind of like the Pokemon Go of this summer. And you know, what I really loved about about going to work with my dad was that everybody there looked so important. And I wanted to grow up to be important too. And so I tried really hard to do that. When I was in college, I went to school and I got good grades in classes and all of that. But on the side, at Colgate University, I started a food delivery business. And in the afternoon, what I would do is I'd go down to the local deli and I'd buy cold cuts and lettuce and tomatoes and rolls. And I would make submarine sandwiches by hand. I remember making up to like 200 of them before dinner. Then I'd go to the library and I'd study. And then around 11 o'clock, you'd find me walking up and down the dormitories of Colgate University selling subs for $2 long time ago. Roast beef, turkey, tuna fish, ham and cheese. I remember the first night that I made $100 of profit, and I thought, that is such a big deal. There's really a future in this. So that summer, I worked as a dishwasher in a really fancy restaurant. Turned out, I realized that being a dishwasher wasn't for me. The next summer, I worked in a law firm on Wall Street, a paralegal. Turned out, I decided working in a law firm wasn't for me. It was too boring for me. And after college, I had some really tough jobs too. I sold textbooks door to door out of the back of my car, my 1974 Buick Skylark. And I also joined a startup, and I worked really hard, kind of never slept. I went to Stanford Business School, joined some really motivated people, and got a job in San Francisco I thought was the job I'd never get. By age 34, I was president of a big company. So what did that feel like? I had arrived. I had achieved everything I hoped to achieve. But you know what? There was something missing. I'd grown up to be just like my dad, but I wanted to be important not just to my dad, but I wanted to be important to other people too, other people who had a lot less. So I want to hear from you what you think. Would you all stand up with me now? And here's the deal. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to vote with me. So here's the question. How important is it in your life to make a difference in the world? If you think that's important, kind of get a hand up there and hold it high so I can see who's out there. So if it's important to make a difference in your life or make the world, the planet a better place, raise your hand. And if it's really important to you, you might want to raise two hands, like put them both up. There we go. And we got folks up top too, so I see a lot of hands getting raised. Now, if it's so important to you that you can't stand it, it's like an itch you got to scratch. I want you to start waving your hands like that, right? And you might want to stomp your feet. I mean, it's super important. And if you got to turn around and be a crazy person, you can do that too. Anybody? Oh, I'm with my people. I see it. All right, cool. All right. So it is important to be, it is important to kind of make a difference in the world and do something special. But the tough part really is how, right? How are we going to do that? So anybody ever read Mark Twain? Yeah? Tom Sawyer fans out there? Huckleberry Finn, maybe the greatest book ever written, right? So you can go ahead and sit down if you want. Mark Twain was amazing, right? He got a lot of stuff right, but I think he blew it on this one. I don't personally think that the two most important days of your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. I mean, maybe the day you're born, that's pretty important, right? Everybody'd agree on that one. But at least for me, it wasn't about the day that I found out why I was born. It took me 20 years to figure that out. 20 years. That last slide of me like this 1978 suit, right? And then the guy in the t-shirt. Moving from being the guy who just wanted to grow up to be in a suit and be like his dad to a guy who is in Africa every day, in a t-shirt, building schools, getting dirty, working with kids for a for-purpose nonprofit organization, That took me a long time to figure out what was missing in my life. Now, no matter where you are in sort of whether you know what that is right today and you're one of the crazy people, right? Or you're like me and you're reluctant. If I'd been asked that question, by the way, I'd have been like, at your age, I'd been like this. Like, yeah, it's not really a priority, kind of need a good job, need to make some money, all of that. It was about me when I was your age. And Adam Braun, who founded Pencils of Promise, he founded it at 25 years old. So at 25 years old, he understood what his real purpose was. Took me like another 20 years to figure that out. Either way, it's okay. Wherever you fall in between that, my message to you is you have a whole lifetime to make an impact. It's about understanding along the way what you listen to and what becomes important to you. Now, at Pencils of Promise, we understand a lot about impact, actually, and how powerful it can be. In fact, we have a whole family of celebrities who help us get the word out and share about the work that we do out in Africa, Guatemala, Ghana, and Laos, so that you can really learn about us through them. And many of these folks have been to the field. So I got another T-shirt. For the first person who can tell me who this is. Does anybody know who that is? Yell it out. I can't hear you. Justin Bieber? It's not Justin Bieber. Oh, you were so close. All right. Yes, in the yellow. Who? No, Lil Wayne. No, it's not Lil Wayne, definitely. Who else knows? Anybody? All right, well, I'll tell you what. Alfred E. Newman? Huh. All right, I'm gonna make it real fair. Did anybody know this was Aiden Alexander? You did? Did you really know? Did you really know? All right. Who did? You did? All right. Can anybody tell me who this guy is? Who said it? It was a trick question, wasn't it? The first one, the Aiden Alexander one. I know I get you every time. All right. Let me just show you what Justin has done for Pencils of Promise. Uh-oh.
Today was probably one of the most magical days of my life.
The oldest is 18 years old.
I met this beautiful girl named Shelly. And my eyes are just open to just something brand new. And my video confession. I actually was hands-on building a school for these children that wouldn't have had opportunity. I'm so happy that I get to do what I do. I even, think it's corny sometimes when people are like, everybody single-handedly can make a difference, but it's not.
All right, so you get the idea, right? Thank you. Who went to see Justin in concert this year? Anybody stand up if you did. Go ahead, stand up. If you saw Justin on the Promise Tour, stand up. So, did you notice on your ticket what it said on the bottom of your ticket by any chance? Did you notice on the bottom of your ticket what it said, other than Justin Bieber at Madison Square Garden or wherever? It said $1 to Pencils of Promise. So here's the cool thing about Justin, right? That video was taken several years ago. He's been in our corner from the very beginning. And on this tour, he gave $1 from every ticket on every concert on the tour. So you can imagine how big a donation was that to us and what a difference that's made for kids. So let's give it up for Justin. So I'd like you to try to remember something in your life. I want you to think back to a time when someone gave you a gift of incredible kindness. Think back. Incredible kindness. And where they asked for nothing in return. Okay? Close your eyes a little bit. Just, get that exact moment. Grab it for yourself. Incredible kindness, nothing in return. Open your eyes, and now let me tell you about mine. So, I was major league into triathlons. You know what triathlons are? Swimming, biking, running. Major fitness crazy. Crazy enough to ride 100 miles on my bicycle to go meet my wife and my daughter for a birthday party, instead of being like a normal person and going in the car with them, right? So I was going over the California mountains, doing 35 miles an hour on my bicycle, all by myself. Man, it was perfect. Blue day, flying, Tour de France champion, wind through my hair, the whole deal, until the pothole. And big pothole. It's by myself. And I remember watching my front wheel roll into that pothole and literally fold in half. Next thing I knew, I remember going face first, and the pavement was literally coming at me. I was on my back when I woke up, and I couldn't hear anything because it was sort of fuzzy, and I couldn't see anything because it was kind of I couldn't really make out faces. I didn't hurt, so I was numb still. Didn't start to hurt. And there were these really nice people, and they were all hovering around me. And they were like fixing all of the bruises on my knees and my ankles and my elbow. And I had a bad gash here across my forehead and my eyebrow. Must have been nurses. But I couldn't figure out, why were those nurses all wearing orange, I think yellow, because everything at Pencils of Promise is yellow. Why were they all wearing orange suits? I'll tell you why. Because they were these guys. Who knew that my high-speed bike crash would literally happen outside the gates of a California state prison? And who knew that those guys would be out clearing litter on the side of the road at the moment that I hit the pavement? And who knew that the guards would allow them to carry me back into the prison office where they could help clean me up? Seriously, what are the chances of that, right? Lying on my back, in spandex cycling gear, bleeding, unconscious on the road, and these guys happen to be there. Well, I'll never know quite what happened between when I hit the pavement and when they were lifting me into the back of the ambulance, but I will remember to this day, 20 years later, those guys giving me the thumbs up as the ambulance pulled away. And here's what I learned that day. Human instinct kicks in when you see other people in need, right? Human instinct. We don't even know where it comes from. It just is there. These were some of California's toughest dudes, but they had the time and the instinct to care for me and help me when I needed it. And that's why I love when I take Pencils of Promise donors to the field, people that are supporters, because when they get to the field and they see what need looks like, when kids don't have school and kids don't know how to read, it kicks in for them. Their generosity makes sense. And the people they meet, they're just unforgettable. So the result of that bike accident for me was it just started becoming a little bit less about me and more about thinking about how could I actually make a difference in the world. And then I met a girl who got me to act. So it was in Soweto, a township in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I was there. This girl is 6 years old. I was teaching Kindermusik classes at the time. I was CEO of Kindermusik, music classes for young kids. And Soweto is a tough township. It's about 1 million black people who live in poverty and who were separated from white people in a system called apartheid you might have heard of. And to make matters tougher for this township, AIDS had ravaged through this township. And I was teaching Kindermusik this day in an AIDS orphanage. And this little girl popped up out of the class and decided that she was going to be my music teacher assistant for the whole day. Jumped on my leg, and she was, playing instruments with me. Well, we got to the end of the day, which is where this picture's taken, and she just didn't want to let go. She just did not want to go home. And when I put her down, I found out why. She went next door and took her brother by the hand, her younger brother, and walked home. And I followed her. It wasn't too far. Her home was a tin shanty. And she had come to school every day pretty much just to get the free meals. She had no parents. Both her parents had died of AIDS. And she lived all by herself. And maybe you guys don't know what head of the household is, but she was head of the household, meaning she was in charge. She was responsible. And I remember thinking, how can this happen? How can this happen on our planet when a girl who's barely old enough to go to school has to be a grown-up and a parent all at once? It didn't seem real. It doesn't seem real to me today. This is like 15 years ago. So soon after, I came back to the US, and I created a fund within Kindermusik to help kids like this. And that fund has since gone on to help tens of thousands of kids in dozens of countries, to bring music classes and put books in their home, give them musical instruments, and really make a difference based on this one girl that I met. And that was my first act of social purpose. Before I'd started thinking a little bit less about me, and the world might be a little bit bigger than just me. Now I was starting to sort of take shape into what that meant. And kids like this still face incredibly tall odds, tough situation, but a little bit of laughter, a little bit of play, and a few books in their lives, and I feel like I've made just a little bit of a difference. And then a third person in my life took me to a completely different level. And I know this person really well. It's my daughter, our youngest of 3 daughters, Elizabeth, Ellie. And Ellie did 2 things that really rocked my world. The first is when she was about some of your ages. Who's in high school? Raise your hand if you're in high school. Yeah. Anybody in their junior year? Going to be in their junior year? When she was in her junior year, she decided to leave her school and go to a semester school in DC called the School for Ethics and Global Leadership, because she wanted to learn more about the world, not just her community. And that school transformed her, or maybe I should say she transformed herself, which is more important. From being a kid who just wanted to get good grades and go to a good college, to being a kid who wanted to come back to her community and leave it better than she found it, to make her mark. The second thing she did was what really got me going, and it planted a seed that would flower soon after, and that is she formed her own social venture called Girls for Girls. Middle school had been really tough for her, particularly socially. And so her idea was putting high school girls together with middle school girls and showing them what leadership and girls' empowerment looked like. It started out really small. It was just a handful of girls. By the end of the first semester, it was like 50 sets of girls, 50 high schoolers and 50 middle schoolers. And at the end of the first year, she actually wrote a grant and won a grant to bring Hillary Clinton's chief speechwriter to school to talk about girls' empowerment to the entire school. And that was in just 1 year. It got me thinking, if my own daughter has the guts to do this, what's really important to me? What would matter enough to me to be bold, to do something hugely bold at that stage in my life? And so I made a huge decision. I left the for-profit world where I'd worked for 25 years in education, and I decided to work in the for-purpose world, what we call the for-purpose world, which is a nonprofit, Pencils of Promise. And it took me to this statistic. And this is really where I want to focus you today on where we can all come together and help. 1 out of 3 kids in the developing world are illiterate. That means they can't read and they can't write. 1 out of 3. So just think about that. 3 of you in the first row. 1 of you can't read and write. 3 of you over here. 1 of you can't read or write. And here's the deal about being illiterate. It's forever. In the developing world, it's a life sentence of being in poverty. And what we know at Pencils of Promise is that education and learning to read and write is one of the few things that can be guaranteed to break that cycle of poverty. In our communities here in the United States, on Long Island, in places that have great schools, it's 1 in 10. So I looked at this and said, wait a minute, I've got 10 years left in my career. Is there a way where we can move all of those countries that are on the left to what it ought to be on the right? I want to take you to what it feels like to be illiterate. And I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'm going to take you to Ghana, which is one of the places I spend a lot of time in. And I want to take you to a rural community where there's no electricity, there's no paved roads, you're on a dirt road, there's no running water, there are no bathrooms. And I want you to be the student. And it goes like this. At home, your parents speak a language called Ewe, but they can't read or write. When you get to kindergarten, the teachers are speaking a little bit of Ewe, but they're speaking a lot of this other language that you never heard before called English. And you know it's important because all the other schools only use English, they don't use Ewe. By the end of 2nd grade, you're already falling behind because you're not even sure what it sounds like, English, and what it means. And you are reading in groups of 7. So here's a picture of a school before Pencils of Promise gets involved. And you can see everybody gathered around. What are they gathered around? Can you see? Shout it out. A book, right. This classroom has 35 kids. How many books do you think it has? 5. 5 books. Not 5 different books. 5 copies of the only book that classroom has for the entire year. Now you can think about your classroom and how many books were in it when you were in. These guys are probably in 5th grade, maybe 6th grade, right? And I want you to imagine this. I want you to imagine that you're one of those 7 kids and you're lucky enough to have the book in your hand. So think right now about, I got the book in my hand, and you got 3 friends to your left, and you got 3 friends to your right, who aren't as lucky to have the book in their hand. How easy is it going to be to learn to read if you're that child all the way out on the edge? Pretty tough. So by 6th grade, you've fallen behind, and you may have given up and not gone to school, and even if you get to 6th grade, you're not going to make it to 7th grade probably because that school, it's in a completely different town. And there's no bus, no parent to drive you. You'd have to walk. And then this one is really important. That school, it costs money to go to that school. Anybody know of a public school in your world that costs money to go to? In this world, up to 6th grade is free. After that, your parents need to pay for school. And your parents can't hope to afford that because they live on $1 a day and work in the fields. So by the end of 6th grade, for most of you, your life is pretty much written down. If you're a boy, you're going to work in the fields. If you're a girl, you're going to work at home. You may get married by age 13 or 14, and then other things happen after that that make life even tougher. It does not have to be this way. It does not have to be this way. We know how to teach kids to read. 250 million kids around the world cannot read or write. 250 million. That's like, there are 330 million people in the United States. It's like almost all of the United States put in together. Can't read or write. And Pencils of Promise works in 3 different countries here, including Nicaragua, to try to solve that. And when I joined, I was so proud to be able to take this organization to a different level of impact and reach more kids. And here's how we do it. Our mission, as you heard Adam say in the video, is that every child deserves a great school. And so we build schools that governments run, we train teachers, we give kids books, and we stick around to make sure it works, right? And what that really means is that we have 370 schools where kids are learning to read and write, where before us, they either didn't have a school or they couldn't read and write. And the results have been amazing. We've gone from 1 in 3 kids that can't read to just 1 in 5, and our goal is 1 in 10, just like it is everywhere here in the US. So let me take you on a quick tour of what I get to do every day and kind of show you our work. I get to go to places like this, the Mekong River Delta in Laos. It's a small, enchanted, landlocked country in Southeast Asia with just 6 million people, one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. And places like this, the volcanic mountainsides of Guatemala in Central America, home to vast rainforests and beautiful historic Mayan sites. And by the way, volcanic eruptions, if you look on the left there and you see that tallest peak, that volcano was erupting the week I was there. And some of you ever been around that? It's pretty exciting. And what we do, when we all over the developing world, we see this. And that is a school. This is a school under a thatched hut or sometimes under a tree. And you can imagine when it rains, which it does a lot in the rainy season for weeks on end, what happens? No school. It's just pouring rain. Or we see things like this, government schools that were built years ago and weren't built well, and the roofs are all in disrepair and falling apart. So imagine for a second, just imagine this. Your school, it's raining, you're getting wet, and you're sitting in mud. That's what happens before we get involved. And when we do, we build a school with the community, and an amazing thing happens. The community builds a school themselves. We help them. They put up actually 20% of the cost of building that school themselves. These are $1-a-day people, and they create materials and sand and gravel and all of that, and we build the school together. And when they finish it, it's amazing. It looks like this. You can just imagine the parents in that community, how proud they feel about helping achieve the dream they've always had for their child to go to a proper school, have a proper bathroom, and learn how to read and write in the national language and what that will mean for the next generation. We can solve this. We know how to do this. Inside, they're gorgeous. Maybe not as gorgeous as your school or this campus, but they're a dignified learning place. Every class has its own space, which is definitely not the norm in the developing world. They have a ceiling fan so the kids can be more comfortable. And let's take another poll. How many of you have a smartphone? Raise your hand if you have a smartphone. That's a lot. And let's keep your hand up if you also have internet access at home. And let's keep your hand up for one more reason, if you have it, which is how many of you have, let's say, more than 5 books at home that you can take a look at some point? All right. That's a lot of people. That's like 2/3 of the room, maybe almost all the room. If I took that same poll in pop communities before we got there, how many hands do you think would have been raised? 0. None. And that's what we're trying to change. That's what we do every day, trying to change that. The other thing we like to do is have fun, because we know that kids have huge fun, and people who get involved with a nonprofit want to enjoy it. They want to smile. If you notice a lot about our website and what we do, it's about kids having fun and being kids, and that's really, if you boil it all down, that's what we're trying to do, is let kids be kids without having to worry about whether or not they have a roof over their head or whether or not they learn how to read. And now I'm just going to move it to sort of what you can do. I mean, I've talked a lot this morning about my life journey and how I moved from it being all about me to, at this stage in my life, trying to make it all about what difference can I make for others. Here's the really cool thing. Based on the crazy people that were jumping around earlier, based on the people that even just raised their hand, you guys are in such a better place than I was when I was your age. And your generation cares so much more about what can happen, and you're doing something about it. So here's what we could do. Who would be down for turning the school up top into the school on the bottom? Who would be up for that? Raise your hand. Come on. That's all you got? How many of you would rather go to school down on the bottom than up on top? Everybody, right? We can do that together. We got like 1,000 people here. We can make that happen. Here's how. We talked earlier about the campaign, and I would love you to consider what you could do to support helping build that school. We've built 370 schools. We'd like to build 371. And actually, we'd like to build thousands. We built 70 last year, one every 90 hours, roughly. We'd love for you to be part of building that next school. And the way that's going to work is, if you would be willing to donate a little bit, IYF is amazing, and they're going to be willing to match what you donate. So let's give it up for IYF for being willing to do that. They're going to match dollar for dollar. Yeah. So every dollar that you are willing to give, or maybe if you want to talk to your parents about it, your parents might be willing to give, or a friend might be willing to give to this campaign, you know, that'll get matched. And if we get to $3,000, what will happen is kind of an added bonus. That's our goal. We'll actually kick in that every campaign that gets to $3,000 will enter you in a raffle to go to Guatemala with us and visit the schools. And every level you go above that, you get more entries, and some pair of people is going to get to go with us and do just what Justin did. So take out your phones and take a picture of this. If you have your phones, if you're allowed to use them, take a picture of this or go ahead and log on. It's fundraise.pencilsapromise.org. That's just our website, fundraise.pencilsapromise.org/IYF. Right? And you can go there. You'll see a cool video from IYF. You'll see what it's all about, and you can donate. Now, you can donate $1. Would be cool. $5 would be better. $25 would be huge. $50 would blow my mind, right? Whatever you donate is going to be really valuable. So if you'd think about doing that for me, I would really appreciate it. And the kids will benefit, obviously. Thank you for letting me chat with you this morning. I would love to take questions and talk more about what we do. And thank you for what you're doing. I have one more t-shirt. How are we going to give this t-shirt away? I'm gonna think about who asks like the just most killer question, and I'm gonna give the t-shirt to that person. So think hard. Who's up? You want to pick? Let's start over here, right in front.
What's the best experience you had working in third world countries?
The best experience I had. Well, what would you mean by best? Like for me personally, or what do you mean by best? What would be best for you?
Like, what's the most eye-opening like situation you was in, like helping build schools in them poor countries?
So, I'll tell you what. It's actually a great question, and I think the most powerful moment I had was the first time I went. The first time I went. And the first place that I went was to Ghana. And I'd spent a lot of time, you heard me talk about Soweto in South Africa, right? And I'd spent a lot of time in other countries. I'd spent time in India. But I'd never been to the real rural places that have deep poverty, that are beyond the roads, where literally it's bumpy roads, and it's what sometimes is referred to as the last mile, right? And that first time I drove down the road, what I realized is that everything that I'd thought about the world was what I knew, but that the world had so much that I didn't know. And that experience of getting into the part that I didn't know really made me uncomfortable. You know? It was like, this is just different than anything I know. I don't know these foods. I don't know these people. I don't know what education looks like maybe here. And I recognized that being uncomfortable like that, that was the best thing that's happened to me. That when we stretch ourselves and get just a little bit uncomfortable into things that we aren't used to, it really sticks with us. How about this way? Who's over here? Yeah, hop up. Stand up so we can hear you.
Hi, Emmanuel Santos from Truth 5. I have a question in care of people that are willing to volunteer to this kind of events. Are they any type of program that you already have for them to apply to or try to interact with this organization?
Yeah, great question. So, did you say Emmanuel? Is that your name? Emmanuel. So, a couple different ways you can get involved. One way is just like we talked about with the campaign. So you can give a small amount of money and get involved in helping us. And by the way, the first 5 schools that Adam Braun built when he started Pencils of Promise were in Laos, that small country in Southeast Asia. And those schools cost $25,000 to build, so pretty good chunk of money. Every single donation for those first 5 schools was less than $100, and it came from people like you in this room. Pencils of Promise started as a youth movement, and it still is the majority of people that help us build the schools. So that's one way you can get involved. Another way you can get involved is if you go to college and you want to be an intern, we're always hiring interns over the summer and after college, for interns around the year. So jump on our website and see the openings that we have for internships. The other way that you can get involved is a way I'd really like you to think about, which is go back to your school and start a Pencils of Promise club. And we have a whole team in our office that helps high school clubs and college clubs do events to raise awareness of this illiteracy problem and to raise money. And pop clubs have built schools. In fact, I just had a 13-year-old girl come from Indianapolis where her pop club at her high school built a $25,000 school in Guatemala, and she decided next year she's going to build a new school in Ghana. So there's a huge way for you guys to make a difference. Those are my favorite schools to have built when you build them. Yeah, how about way back in the, right there in the blue shirt? You, yep, oh, turn around, yeah, you.
Oh, sorry. Last question? Last question.
Last one.
What you're doing for just like people, it's amazing. But I want to listen at least like one story that when you support the students, like people with building a building and like donation support. But is there anyone who have changed their mindset after they receive your support, not just being like helped? After they saw what you guys are doing, if there's like anyone who changed their mindset, like, oh my God, there's people. Like, I went to Haiti and like some other countries in Africa through the IYF, but there's, when we help them, there's many students, but at least like 5, 10 students came to us and then telling us, oh, your activities and the event changed my mindset. I was just thinking that my country is poor, I don't want to live in this country anymore. But what I saw you are doing here, oh, one day I can be the person who can help other people like this. So your event, your activities changed my mindset. So is there any people got changed the mindset from your activities?
That's what it's all about. It's all about changing mindset. It's all about growing up in one place and growing into being in the whole place. Let me tell you about one person in our organization who had his mindset changed, and his name is Jorge. Jorge runs our Guatemalan operation. So he's responsible for all of the schools that get built in Guatemala, and there are 170 schools that have been built in Guatemala. Guatemala is his home country. It's where he was born. He was a Mayan boy who lived in a rural jungle village. He couldn't read and write. He didn't have a school. But when Jorge was growing up, he was lucky enough to find someone who came through his village who wanted to give him a scholarship to go to middle school, to get him to the next school. And he had to, at 10 years old, he was one of 11 kids. At 10 years old, he had to go away from home and live away from home just to be at this middle school. He did well, and he got a scholarship to go to high school. This little Mayan boy from the jungle village was now going to get his high school degree. And how do you think he did? He did well, and he got a scholarship to come to the United States to get his college degree. Now, when Jorge got to Minnesota, where he was going to school, other than being incredibly cold because he was from a Mayan village and it was Minnesota, it was a really different culture, and it was a different language. He knew his Mayan mother tongue, he knew Spanish, and now he had to learn English. But Jorge being Jorge, how do you think he did in college? He did well. But let me tell you what Jorge did that he did best. When Jorge got done with college, guess where he decided to go? Back to Guatemala. Back to his Mayan village. Back to make his country a better place. And Jorge now, every day that he wakes up, his team of 30 people in Guatemala are looking for communities just like his jungle village to help kids just like him. That is what it's all about. And when people start doing that in this room, going out and completing the loop and coming back to helping their communities, the world and the planet will truly be a happier place. So go do it.